I'm here with Larissa Africa, a registered nurse who has spent the last 2 decades implementing, managing, and leading strategies to develop nursing organizations. She is president of Versant Holdings, and she's based in Las Vegas. Hi there, Larissa. Great to see you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me here today.
Well, let me ask you, is the nursing sector in any way different from other business entities working today?
In my experience, nursing is the largest sector within the healthcare workforce. However, the needs of nurses in terms of development initially when they enter the workforce and throughout their careers is the same. When you think about how physical therapists are being onboarded, when you think about pharmacists, respiratory care practitioners, we all need to be provided with the same amount of dedication and resources when we enter the profession, and then continue to engage each individual in the workforce so that we retain the best talent.
Right, okay, so that onboarding experience is very key. Tell me ideally what that looks like.
Absolutely. That onboarding experience, whether you're new into the profession or you're onboarding as an experienced individual, let's take being an experienced RN and onboarding into that new organization, that first instant and first interactions with the organization, that first interaction with your coworkers can make a difference on your experience for the rest of that time. Mm-hmm. And understanding what the organization can provide for you as much as the services that you provide for them also makes a big difference in your experience. Mm-hmm. And that's a big challenge I think that we're seeing in workforce right now. The first time that you're onboarded, if that experience isn't optimal, the likelihood is, as an individual, you're not going to be engaged in the organization. You're not going to be engaged in the activities of the organization. When you're not engaged, your tendency is you start looking somewhere else.
So break it down for me. What is an optimal onboarding experience?
The first thing that organizations must look for when they're onboarding an individual is making sure that everybody is on the same page about what the goals are of the organization in terms of the onboarding practices. What resources are available for your new employees? What does the career pathway look like for these new employees? It's also really important and key to the onboarding practice, the role of the preceptor. A preceptor is this individual who is providing guidance for a new nurse, for example, in their practice. If you have strong preceptors, strong not only clinically, but strong in their role as a preceptor because it's a very different set of competencies that's required, then that allows the new individual, the new person to really understand not only what they're supposed to do in terms of their clinical practice, not only in terms of what they work, but also what that whole experience looks like. Mm-hmm. And I think many organizations make the mistake of choosing the expert individual to become preceptors, but not all expert nurses, for example, are great preceptors.
Okay, so preceptors like mentors.
Yes, preceptors, mentors that can be used interchangeably. Preceptors typically are more focused on the clinical practice, while your mentors are more focused on how do you develop professionally. Mm-hmm. And as a mentor, that's another role that is very helpful for somebody during the onboarding process. Once a new graduate nurse, for example, has been onboarded, what's in it for me moving forward? What does my career path look like? Mm-hmm. You think about the different generations in the workforce now. You have millennials, you have Gen Xers, you have baby boomers in the workforce. Everybody needs a mentor of some kind to know, how do I continue to grow personally? How do I continue to grow professionally? And how do I find my value in this organization that I'm in?
Okay. In your work and research with the state of Connecticut, what are your initial observations about what needs to be done to create the robust nursing workforce that they are striving for?
Mm-hmm. The center is in a very unique position. They are far away enough from the daily operations of running an organization where they can take a step back and look at what's happening at the healthcare organizations at the 50,000 foot level. And then that allows them to really look at what singular solution can be implemented across the state. The challenge in healthcare is we're fragmented. And that's just inherent to what's happening in our environment. However, as much as possible, the center has an opportunity to take a step back, evaluate a solution that would help develop the entire workforce more than just nursing. And where it will be different is how it's operationalized in each organization and how it's operationalized for each workforce profession, in each profession.
Okay, can you give me an example of maybe best practices that should be adopted?
Sure. For one example might be looking at a competency-based system to develop the workforce. You have the ability to identify the competencies for the entire organization. Using those competencies, an organization can then determine what the gaps are in preparing each individual. That allows the organization to also remediate those gaps much more efficiently. When you think about it, healthcare organizations now are being asked to do more with less. And unless we come up with a solution that's both efficient and effective, it will be very difficult to sustain those over time. So when you think about the nurses, there are certain competencies that a critical care nurse needs to be validated on, educated on, and their performance viewed by a preceptor. It's the same exact process when you look at onboarding somebody in physical therapy, somebody who's new in respiratory care. You look at their competencies, you remediate their gaps, you validate their competencies, and then you use the outcomes to make your decisions and continue to improve the onboarding process for everybody.
Okay, and in terms of, you had mentioned that it's a very fragmented sector. How can we encourage better communication between the different entities that work in this area?
And that's, I think, one of the reasons why the center is also in that unique position, because there's one center that's pushing and encouraging the communication across the different areas. And having one system providing that support. Now, the challenge that I see a lot with organization is not having the capacity to not only implement onboarding practices, but it's a sustainability, because there's not one individual or one group driving for an entire health system, for example. So in terms of communication, having it come down from one organization such as the center can really help push the situation and can push the solution forward.
Is there a direct connection between a strong onboarding experience and retention?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's been proven over and over and published many times that when you onboard you have a strong onboarding process, that there is a higher likelihood of these individuals staying in the organization. And this onboarding process, as I mentioned earlier, is much more than just developing the skills that they need to practice in their profession, but also developing them professionally and mentoring them through the practice.
Okay. And how would you describe the work that you do with creating healthy work environments? What does that look like?
One of the things that we do at Versant is focusing on the outcomes for the organization, and not only program-specific outcomes of how well the programs or the different solutions are working, but we're also looking at the different environments that's making an impact on the retention of the nurses. Take, for example, instability. It's part of what the healthy work environment is really looking at. How do you prevent bullying? How do you prevent minimize reality shock? And how do you prevent behaviors that's impacting the retention of your staff, and not only coming from another staff members, but patients, families, and visitors as well.
Is that common?
It's common enough that we need to do something about it. We
Okay.
can't allow it to continue. And which is one of the reasons why it's really important to continue and collect the data on what's happening not only at the national level, state level, but down to an organization's department. Some departments do better than others. If there's bullying that occurs, for example, in one area, the organization's leaders must address those issues, because that's one of the reasons why nurses are leaving.
Okay. It must be a challenge with a multi-generational setup to address the needs of each generation, which could be vastly different from one another. Is that right?
They're very different, but they're also very similar. They're very different on how they react to situations, but they are very similar, that every single generation, whether, again, you're a millennial, you're part of the Gen X generation, or you're part of the baby boomers, everybody wants to be engaged. Everyone wants to be valued by their organization. Everyone wants to make sure that their own personal values align with the organization's vision and mission. Everyone wants to know that they're making a difference not only in the care that they're providing for their patients, but also making an impact in the strategy of the organization as a whole. So for leaders of organizations, it's really important to know for each of the different generations what is important for them, and addressing and reacting quickly to making sure that they continue to be engaged and that they continue to feel valued.
As I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, you're a registered nurse. Do you recall your onboarding experience, and can you share with us whether that led to a positive situation down the road, or something else?
Absolutely. I love sharing my own experience, because I was one of the few who were fortunate enough to actually begin my career as an intern in the Versant internship program. I've been a nurse for 20 years, and my onboarding experience, knowing that my organization where I started has dedicated the resources and made sure that I was onboarded properly. I had the right amount of support, not only from my preceptors, but on an ongoing basis. Having a mentor I can go to, and to have conversations as simple as, how do I talk to physicians, because I've never done it before, aside from my experience in nursing school, has made all of the difference. And I really feel strongly that because of that onboarding process, it allowed me to be not only be able to be safe and competent in the care that I was providing for my patients, but also have the ability to keep it moving forward, and wanting to give back to the organization, and wanting to give back to the nurses, and wanting to give back to the profession. And that's where my passion started.
All right, Larissa, Africa, thank you so much for sharing with us. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.